The Boys and the Umbrella Academy are two shows that follow a similar formula and both arrived on our screens in the exact same year, 2019. Endgame had just been released and the fatigue of the MCU was something that was starting to enter our lives, but both Netflix and Amazon Prime Video felt as though they had a solution to that, and that was these two superhero shows that were a bit darker, had comedy embedded within them and were targeted towards a more mature audience. The Umbrella Academy recently came to a close and drew in the lowest rated episode it ever produced in its finale, and The Boys released its penultimate season and just broke all of Amazon Prime Video's viewing records, showing that the two shows that arrived at the same time are going out in two completely different ways. But why is that when they were once so close in quality? What's caused them to drift further and further apart? Well, I thought I'd look at exactly that and answer what's happened. So let's get into it. Here is why The Boys has outlived the Umbrella Academy. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The difference in source material. One thing that we've seen over the years when a show drifts from its source material, or it naturally gets to a point where it wants to continue on after the source material because it's not been completed, is it tends to take a huge decline in terms of quality. Most famously, this happened with Game of Thrones. With regards to the Umbrella Academy, that's exactly what's happened. The first two seasons had material to go off, and they were considered the best two seasons of the show, with the season finale of the second season almost bagging a 9 on IMDb. But then, once season 3 came around, there was no new material for the show to go off. Even though the volume of the comic that was announced was titled The Sparrow Academy, and they focused on that, it hadn't been released and still hasn't to this day. And that was where the decline in the show truly started, as they had to go off on their own. When it came to the final season, it was obviously then down to the writers of the show to have to create an ending themselves, and I do often think that without the brains behind the original being there or having the work out there, it's truly difficult to be able to understand the world that they created in the way that they do. And as we saw, the ending that we received was extremely poor, showing that this show was kind of solely relying on the source material when it came to its success in storytelling. It needed those reference points to be able to go off and then create something that was heavily inspired. When looking at The Boys, a lot of its success is obviously down to Kripke and the team that he has, but something that has probably helped the show is the fact that all of the material that the writers could ever want is pretty much right in front of them. There's 72 issues of the comic, and most importantly, there's an ending there. So there's a start and there's also a final destination that the entirety of the show has been building towards, something that we're going to be seeing in season 5. Whilst the show hasn't followed the comics to a T, you can see the direct inspiration in storylines from it and the more holistic overarching plot that's present, something which was probably being thought about when season 1 first aired. So with the Umbrella Academy not having an existing ending to work towards when the show was first created, it was something that was probably only thought about when Netflix decided that they were going to cancel the show. But at least the authors of the comic now know how not to end it. The difference in pacing. One major difference within these two shows is the fact that the Umbrella Academy always kind of had a one-season story which then concluded with a cliffhanger which would lead into the next season. Whereas The Boys has always had an overarching story which has almost allowed for more fluidity throughout the episodes. The Boys has always stuck to what it knows and released 8 episodes in a season, almost doing it before every other show realised that an 8-episode structure was better than a 10. And historically, the Umbrella Academy always released 10 episodes, before in the final season only releasing 6. Something which just didn't make sense and made the pacing of the show feel incredibly one-sided and the final part to just feel rushed. After receiving 30 episodes of a show, you expect to have 10 in the final season to be able to have that consistent pacing, the runtime that we're used to, and the time with the characters that we've almost grown accustomed to in order to understand their motives and get the best out of them. But that just wasn't the case at all. The pacing of The Boys has always been consistent, and even with the runtime of the episodes changing from time to time, that doesn't bother me, because it always tends to balance out by the end of the season. The Umbrella Academy concluded whilst feeling empty, which is a major issue that I've never had with The Boys. The establishing of a universe. One thing that has helped The Boys, and a reason as to why it's probably still going strong, is the fact that it felt like an entire universe was created within the show, and it's incredibly consistent. Whether that be the flashbacks that we often see from time to time with Soldier Boy, the trauma that Homelander endured that impacts him in the present day and is a main reason as to why he's like the way that he is, the spin-off show Gen V, or even their social media presence in our world. There's been constant development from the moment that the show first aired, and everything interconnects to a wider, bigger picture, the VCU. That's not me saying that Gen V is a reason as to why The Boys is so good, but it adds another layer to it, and Season 4's connected story gave the show a new perspective and followed on from us seeing a different part of that very world. When looking at The Umbrella Academy, the fact that it's a show that is based on multiple different timelines and we went forward and back in time, the possibilities should have been endless. The introduction of the Sparrow Academy was a good move for the show to make, however, the way that it was handled was just so poor. This was the chance for the Umbrella Academy to really branch out and provide a different layer to its story by introducing new characters after 20 episodes, but it just didn't work at all. I'd also say the level of trauma that the children endured when they were younger was something that kind of got forgotten as time went on. Unlike Homelander, where he still remembered everything, these siblings remembered, but not one of them really had lasting effects. I'd say Victor was the one that mainly did, but in Season 4 it kinda just felt shoehorned in. The villain. In every good show or movie that's centered around a group of superheroes, what's the main thing that you need? You need a villain that the heroes are going up against. Within The Boys, it's Homelander, who's an incredibly complex character and has a belief system that goes against everything that should make him a hero. And I'd say it's been interesting and entertaining watching his descent into darkness and him gradually gain the power that he's always wanted. Within the Umbrella Academy, when looking back over the 4 seasons, I wouldn't say that there was ever really a villain that was top tier or matched the quality of the Umbrella Academy. In fact, Victor was probably the best in Season 1. Other than that, I don't think it ever really felt like there was a villain that we could see transforming or truly understanding their motives. The obvious answer would have been for Reginald to have stepped into that role in the final season, as it always felt like he was going to become the final boss that they'd need to take down. The very person that made them who they were. But sadly, the writers decided to go in a different direction, a direction that was lackluster. The opposite trajectory of viewing figures. When looking at the viewing figures of both shows, they appeared to be going in a completely different direction. For example, The Boys just recently broke Amazon Prime Video's viewing figure record and was watched by 55 million people over the course of 39 days, the highest that the show has ever had. Whereas when looking at the Umbrella Academy, it's a different statistic, but you can see the drastic difference in viewership from what it once was. When Season 3 was first released, in its first week it had 7.4 billion minutes watched, an incredible number. Whereas for Season 4 of the show, it only had 863.1 million minutes watched, showing a drastic decline in the amount of eyes that were on the show. You could argue that there were less episodes than usual, but even if you add on 40%, it doesn't take you anywhere near what Season 3 got in its opening week, showing that the interest in the show had naturally reached a drop-off. The Boys has a huge social media presence as well, and the virality of the show is something that definitely helps it, and that's something that the Umbrella Academy has never really been able to capture. The Boys is an incredible show in its own right, and the idea of a comparison only really came from the fact that both of these shows aired for the first time within months of each other. They're both based around a group of heroes, and one of them is still going extremely strong, whilst the other has just died a death that I don't think any of us could have ever imagined after watching the first 2 seasons of the show. So, there you have it, why The Boys has outlived the Umbrella Academy. If you want to see a breakdown of Season 4 of The Boys or a video on how I feel the Umbrella Academy should have ended, then click on the card in the top corner. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. Why do you think The Boys has outlived the Umbrella Academy? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.